Good afternoon, apparently. I will call this meeting to order. Welcome, board members and guests, to the Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021 meeting of the South Placer Regional Transportation Authority. We are very excited to welcome the public to in-person participation for the first time in well over a year. Thanks for coming. Those not attending in person can access the meeting through the Zoom link webinar provided on the agenda. A recording of this meeting will be available on the PCTPA website. This meeting is conducted via teleconference under Executive Order N29-20. We appreciate your participation and patience with this technology. Public comment. There will be multiple opportunities throughout this meeting for public comment. After I open an item for public comment, those joining us by webinar can signal they wish to speak by clicking the raise hand button on the bottom of the Zoom webinar window. If you are joining over the phone, you can press *9, and SPRTA staff will call out individuals one by one who have indicated they wish to speak. For those joining us in person, you are welcome to come to the podium. We ask that anyone making a public comment state their name and city of residence. You will then have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak, and we will notify you when your 3 minutes are up. If you experience technical difficulties and are unable to provide public comment during this meeting, please email your comments to Sol V. Sable, our clerk, at ssabol@pctpa.net. Board action. Because this meeting is being conducted via teleconference, all votes will be roll call votes. Board members, we ask that you state your name prior to making a motion or seconding a motion for the record. Once an item has been moved and seconded, I will request the clerk call the roll to vote. Thank you. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's see, we need a roll call, I think.
I think we do. Broadway?
Here.
Holmes?
Here.
Howdeshelt?
Here.
Joyner?
Here.
All righty. I'll ask for approval of the action minutes of April 28th.
Broadway second?
Joyner moves, Broadway seconds.
Okay.
All those in favor? Oh, will the clerk please call the roll?
Broadway?
Yes.
Holmes?
Yes.
Howdeshelt?
Yes.
Joyner?
Yes.
All righty. Agenda review. Are there any items on the agenda that need to be changed?
No, sir.
No changes. Okay, this is public comment. Anyone that wishes to address this board on any item that is not on the agenda, now is the time to come forward, or on video. You have 3 minutes. Is there any public comment?
There's no request for public comment on the Zoom.
I didn't hear that. What'd you say?
No.
No? Okay. Item F, mini workshop on Nexus Study Analysis Framework for Tier 1 and Tier 2 Impact Fee Update. This is presented by Aaron Hoyt.
Hello, Mr. Chair and Board of Directors. So this is going to be an emphasis on many today, given our earlier...
What are you looking at me for?
Maybe it's the glasses on me. Emphasis on many today, in essence of time, but I am going to make sure that I hit the high points of this presentation, and I do also want to allow opportunity for interview at any point in time to ask questions of me as we go through here. In the event that I gloss over something, we will, of course, as always, have some Q&A at the end, but feel free, as you wish, to stop me in the middle of it. Here today with me, I have Don Hubbard, who is here virtually. You can see him on the screen. Don Hubbard is our consultant who was awarded the contract back in January of 2019. And so Donald is from WSP, and he's been helping us through the process with his staff. So the focus of today's workshop is to provide an overview of really our next steps to the travel demand model and impact fee update for SPRTA Tier 1 and Tier 2. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time on background. Stakeholder outreach was conducted back in February and really highlight a few of the items that I think are meaningful to mention because it may influence how we decide to proceed. We'll get into really the core of the presentation, which is going to be on the Nexus study itself. That is the next component that will be starting later this summer, early fall, and I want to provide an update on that and get some we're proposing recommendations for your concurrence. And maybe any other direction you may have that'll help us in that analysis framework. As I've listed in the memo, there's really 5 areas that we're looking at recommendations. A lot of those are being consistent with what we've been doing, but there are a few changes. And then we'll wrap up with schedule and, of course, Q&A. So just as a quick recap, SPRTA was conceptualized, the South Placer Regional Transportation Authority was conceptualized back in 2000 when we were talking about some of the same topics we're talking about today is how we're going to fund our transportation improvements in the future. It was actually formed through a joint powers authority with the cities of Rockland, Lincoln, Roseville, and unincorporated Placer County. That set into play the first of regional impact fees on all new development in Placer to fund, at that point in time, 5 projects. In 2009, a regional supplement fee was implemented to collect additional fees to fund Placer Parkway, and that's referred to as Tier 2. Those fees go towards what is now 11 projects that are shown on your map. As I mentioned, it initially started off with 5. In 2007, when we did our periodic update, we added 3 more projects. And then the last update, which is in 2014, we added 3 more. So we have a history kind of going back as we have these updates to add additional projects. And when we go through these updates, we also look at what are the current scopes of the project, have they expanded, have our costs increased because of that, accounting for inflation, accounting for additional projects. So those have all influenced the program capacity, as I'm referring to on your screen now, is how much money is it within the SPRTA Tier 1 as well as a Tier 2 program. And you can see over time that has changed because of our projects that make up the program. And really the need, as the last slide here, there's a variety of reasons why, but essentially our model is old. It is a software program, just as any software you may have on your computer or phones. They eventually go out of phase, and you need something new. Also, there's a mitigation fee act that requires us to update the Nexus component of the study. So we're updating for those reasons, and this is going to be a much different, has been much different exercise in the past, where we've had a much stronger linkage and eye towards engaging the public and working with the regional fee strategy that we talked about during the PCTPA meeting. Okay, so stakeholder outreach here. There's a variety of engagement opportunities that we've proposed here. This is the second of 4 of our virtual board workshops, or in person now. We also have 3 stakeholder workshops. We have email blasts that go out on project updates and different topics to try to engage various staff across our agencies, the public, businesses, and other advocacy organizations. And we're starting to approach the end of kind of year 1 of those outreach efforts. But the main thing I want to talk about in these next 2 slides is when we had our first series of stakeholder engagement meetings, we met initially with the builders. There were 8 representatives from 7 different builders and property owners in the South Placer area who we engaged on the topic of the fee program and how is it currently working, what do they like, what might they like to see change as we're going through this update. And there's the various outcomes that were listed here, but the first 2 bullets are, I think, really of primary interest to us. Those are that they were really concerned with a possible fee increase, rightfully so. And they were also interested in revisiting Tier 2 fee program as a Nexus-based fee. Right now, it's a uniform fee across those 8 new developing areas, and I'll show on a later slide. And so there's really interest of that. That interest also goes back to discussions we've had with this board about looking at Tier 2 as a more of a Nexus-based fee across the district. So those are really the 2 things that we heard loud and clear from the builders. We also met with a stakeholder group, as a much broader group that had business builders as well, but business representatives, local agency staff, And we also had some advocacy organizations who were invited, and I believe only a few of them had attended. The feedback we got from there through a series of polling questions was about 65% of participants felt that the program was about the right size. They thought, the projects we have in there, the fees being assessed, were about the right size. But 71% of those participants also thought maybe we should add additional modes. They said that maybe we should include transit facilities, maybe ped and bike facilities. Some local agency staff, I think, feels that this could help out with meeting VMT goals set in various locales here in South Placer and other mitigation programs. And just like the first stakeholder meeting, they really want to know the impacts of COVID. We know the traffic's coming back. We know it has changed patterns, but we think long-term we'll go back to normal at this point in time. So on the screen here is just our stakeholder schedule going forward for the next 4 months. We have today's board workshop. We'll have another email blast going out on the topic of how local traffic patterns are determined. So we're using big data for that, and we'll be doing a short write-up on that, so that'll come out in July. In August, we're proposing at this point in time to do an online virtual workshop or survey. We have to really coordinate that schedule closely with the delivery of our baseline model, because that's really going to be the impetus for discussion there of what do traffic patterns look like. And we will also want to make sure that we're closely coordinated with the funding strategy. And then we'll do another stakeholder update in September. So I'm going to switch gears now, but before I do so, I want to see if there's any questions. Seeing no heads, or seeing the heads shaking from the board, we're okay?
Any questions?
Oh, there's,
Was it? Who's? Oh,
okay. We'll move on. There we go. Thumbs up. I like thumbs up. So we're going to move on to the next component here, which is really the core of today's conversation that I'd like to focus on. As I mentioned earlier, there's 2 different fee components within SPRTA. There's a Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 1 was the initial program that has these 10 fee districts that are shown on your screen here. Those 10 fee districts are circled in a white bubble for your recognition. And it is a true nexus-based fee program applied on a dwelling unit equivalent through all the areas. The second component in the ladder of the program to be added to 8 future growth areas started off as a nexus fee program, but then we arrived at really a uniform fee attributed across the different 8 future growth areas. And as we set off when we started this process that we were going to evaluate Tier 2 as a true nexus fee program, we're going to do so. We also heard that from the builders and from other staff through our stakeholder meetings that there was interest to do so. So that is something we're recommending here, and just to put out full disclosure, that's the process we're going. We don't know where we're going to end up with this. We don't know what the costs are going to look like. I can assume, just as you may, that some fees are going to go up in certain areas, some fees are going to go down, winners and losers. And so we're going to have to come back to this board with your staff to talk about how we move forward, because there are some strict voting guidelines within SPRTA if we were to change this program. So we'll have to wrestle with just the procedural process as well. As Don Hubbard here has said many a times, doing a nexus study is much like doing your taxes. There's a lot of steps involved in this, and while it's a painstakingly difficult, really what everyone's interested in is the final result. How much do I get to pay in my taxes, or how much I pay in fees, right? That's the end result. So I'm going to skip really all the intermediary steps, but focus on boiling it down to 5 distinct areas, which is where I'm going to have all of our recommendations boiled into for your reference, so you know how it fits into this process. So the first step is we're going to start with our existing project lists. Those 11 project lists or projects are listed here on the screen. We have to start with updating our cost estimates. We got to make sure that the scopes at this point in time are correct. We need to make sure that the costs are accurate, and that we account for inflation at the time of construction. The other thing that we are recommending at this point in time, as we have in the past through prior updates, is we're actually looking to add the IED auxiliary lane project to the SPRTA fee program. Now, in order to do this, we have to go through an analysis to determine how much regional traffic is using these facilities, and and how much funds can be generated from this. So we got to go through some analysis first, but at least at this point in time, we are recommending that we look at this. We also had heard from our stakeholders, including jurisdictional staff, that there is some interest to including alternative modes, transit, bike ped facilities. There are some challenges with this, however, because of the Mitigation Fee Act, we can only fund capital improvements. So some jurisdictions have said, with the direction of the California Air Resources Board and the state to providing electric vehicles, maybe we could utilize SPRTA funds for electrification facilities, for the charging facilities for buses that we're all going to be required to be running electric in the near future. Regional bike facilities such as the Dry Creek Greenway that connects between Roseville and actually west through Placer County, through the Morgan Creek area, out to Sacramento County, as well as over through Granite Bay area to Folsom Lake. That might be a possibility, but we really have to determine and go through the calculations of how we do that. Does it make sense? And so I think this is one area where we're recommending at least to investigate it, discuss this with staff. But I think we would definitely, enjoy hearing your kind of take on this, because it will impact the ultimate fee program, right? If we have more projects, more costs, it's going to go up. And that's something that we heard 65% of the participants saying right now the program's about the right size. So something for us to look into, but we're recommending at least to investigate at this point. The second step in the process is determining where the impacts are coming from and determining what impacts do we have on facilities, what facilities are over capacity. And we'll use our travel demand model, which is in the kind of final stages of validating how the model works and can it produce traffic volumes consistent with what's out there today. And really, the traffic model, you guys have probably heard this in your own settings, in your own jurisdictions. It's a complicated process. Some people refer to it as a black box. We have a few gears in there. We have our inputs of land use, trip patterns, and transportation options, and out we come with some traffic volumes and travel patterns. It really can be broken up into a little something more, I think, simplistic and understandable. We take all of our land uses, whether it's residential, commercial, parks even generate traffic, attractions, connect our roads, connect our bicycle facilities, connect our transit facilities, and then we determine what our traffic patterns are from there. So we'll use that to then determine, which gets into our third step, how we assign a percentage of traffic to each of our 10 zones under Tier 1 or 8 areas under Tier 2, how we consolidate that travel back down to those districts to determine what is their percentage use of a transportation facility. Say Highway 65, for Lincoln, how much of Lincoln's population uses 65, how does that compare to what might be used on I-80 aux lanes. So there's some differences we can assess here by using the travel demand model. Our fourth step is then once we know how much traffic is coming from each of those zones, we can then kind of really boil it down to spreading the cost over all the different land uses. The recommendations here, and actually let me back up one step, I apologize. One of the recommendations that we are using or recommending here as we look at the trips from each of the jurisdictions, that we continue with our practice of using travel patterns and trips from the PM peak hour. This is typically associated with the 4 to 6 PM peak hour commute travel. So there's a long-standing history with all of our jurisdictions and how they size their facilities, how they pay for their own facilities in their jurisdictions. So we want to make sure we're staying consistent with that. As I mentioned, the next one is assessing the cost across all the land uses within each district. We want to also recommend that we're maintaining our current practice of splitting a trip, right? A trip can start at a residential end and end at a commercial use or a non-residential use. And the question that this board has authority to make the decision on where is that trip attributable to, the housing or the non-residential housing unit. So we've traditionally used a 50-50 split between those two. We're recommending staying consistent with that. We're also recommending to exempt certain types of land uses that are in either state law or by practice with our local jurisdictions. Those are exemptions for public K through 8 high schools, as well as accessory dwelling units that are under 750 square feet. And then the final component to this, step 5 here, really is how are we determining fair share? We need to look at each of the facilities, going back to step 1 of how much traffic's being generated, whether those facilities are currently over capacity, and how much traffic the new development has added. So in this little bar chart here, we're kind of providing an illustration to Highway 65, we know at some points in time it's already over capacity. So that orange bar there shows the new traffic from new development being added, and we can only charge new development for that fair share above the actual capacity of the roadway. We can't charge them to fix existing conditions, so we have to go through this calculation as well. So those are really the 5 steps to that process. And to reiterate the recommendations that we're going to start on the path of evaluating Tier 2 as a district-based fee as opposed to a uniform fee that it currently is. We're looking to add the I-80 auxiliary lane project to Tier 1. We're also interested in exploring potentially adding other modes to this, if you're so interested in doing so. I know there's some interest by some local jurisdictions. And then we also want to maintain the practice with these 3 other bullets here of looking at the PM peak hour, splitting trips equally between residential and non-residential uses, and exempting certain specific land uses from those impact fees. So I'm going to pause there before I move to the next section just to see if the board has any questions.
Any questions for staff?
Maybe a couple quick clarifying questions.
Yes.
Just under the exempt public K-8 high schools, does that include charter schools?
So our understanding from talking with each of your staff, because really this is more so on the implementation and collection side of the fees, from what we understand from local agency staff is private schools are charged these impact fees.
Private schools are.
Private schools are.
And
So
charter goes through a public school system to get its charter, so you'd
Yes.
think it would be included.
it may be included, but that is a good clarifying questions you ask, and let me double check with them to determine
Okay.
whether that's accurate or not.
And you'd said that you have typically used a 50-50 split on housing commercial as the origin of traffic. What's that based upon?
So this would be based going back on historical decisions that were made, early on to really not necessarily burden one type of development or other, but for them all to share the same burden of the fee.
But it's not based on data.
It wouldn't be based, I don't think it'd be based on data. Mike, I don't know if you have anything to add in terms of clarification there.
So while a Galleria Mall is definitely an attractor from throughout the region, they're not being weighted any more heavily than my new housing.
Actually, I think our consultant has a little
Okay.
input into that, so.
Thank you. If I may jump in.
Yeah, please.
There's a couple of things going on here. Every trip has 2 ends. For most trips, one end is a house, one end is something other than a house. It's a business, it's a shop, it's your office where you work or whatever. There are places in the state where there is a severe imbalance between houses, residential land uses, and non-residential offices and things. In places like that, where, for example, downtown San Francisco, lots and lots of jobs, not nearly enough housing. For them to have a fee on housing doesn't make much sense because it isn't the housing that's causing their transportation problems. Generally speaking, it's the businesses that are attracting trips from outside and coming across the bridges into San Francisco. Housing actually helps because there's people that can walk or ride a bike or something else to get to work. So in a case like that, it wouldn't make any sense to attribute the traffic impact to the house end. It always gets attributed to the business end. There are other places that are in the opposite situation, a place that's a purely bedroom community where people have to go out to work and shop and things like that, where you don't want to disincentivize somebody putting retail or employment in that area, in a bedroom community. It would be helpful if they did. It would actually reduce the transportation burden. So in those places, you might put 100% or 80% of the trips on one end of the impact of the trip. You would attribute it to one end or the other. In the case of Placer County, you're pretty well balanced in terms of the jobs and housing mix. You've got a good mix, and so ordinarily in a situation like that, the default is that each end is weighted equally. And that has been the previous practice with SPRTA. I recommend that you continue with it unless and until at some point in time you've reached such an imbalance that there is a reason to not use the default.
All right, that's helpful, thank you. I was really curious as to the origin of the original decision and whether it was still valid or not. Good.
Aaron, just a quick clarification, and I might have missed this. So the addition of the I-80 auxiliary lane project to Tier 1. So what is the intent, given where we're at with that project, funding and the planning? What is the purpose of adding it to Tier 1?
So we still have a gap of right now out of about $4 million, and we're trying to fill that gap, with grant funding, but we may ultimately be unsuccessful. We also have the potential as we get closer to construction that costs change, with the economy and construction. So, I guess, if you will, the ultimate backstop, the only one we would have is SPRTA funds. So otherwise, we would have to come back to the two cities for assistance. So.
But including this in Tier 1 is not going to impact our ability on the grant side to secure those grants. It just provides us with, as you said, I like that reference, the backstop
Yes.
in the event that we run short. And by the way, everything we can do to expedite, especially that auxiliary lane. We had a long council meeting last night, and one of the discussions was projects that have taken so many years that they've gone from, at the time, a 1.7 million project to almost 5 million. So certainly the timeliness of it. So thank you for that clarification, because I was trying to think through, and you might have even mentioned it before, but
Yeah,
that makes
and
more
also
sense.
another nuance to that project too, as well as we're trying to get it done as quickly as possible, but we're also trying to be cognizant that we may have a sales tax election as well. So we're trying to thread the needle as well as we best can. So
Certainly. All right, thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
All right.
Seeing none, we'll move on.
All right, I'll wrap up with the last two, I think, slides. We have our schedule here, red star, and the line is showing where we're at, or signifying where we're at. We should wrap up our full model development by September. This includes our base year model. That'll be a 2019 model based on housing units and traffic from 2019 pre-COVID. And then we'll be wrapping up the actual future model also then by September. Our consultant will be working on a model user guide for all the staff should they choose to use this model, so they know how to run it and make changes to inputs if needed. And then the Nexus study, we're really going to be starting off in the next month or so. And so this was kind of really important step for us to share this information with you, since we're only coming here quarterly for kind of your direction. We also, as always, can come to you more frequent if interested, but we thought this was an opportune time to do so. And we'll wrap up everything in June 2022 is the end goal there. So with that, I will take any further questions you may have, directions that you may have on those recommendations that we identified.
Okay, any other further questions for staff on this item?
Bruce has his hand up.
Bruce?
Yeah, Chairman Holmes. So with the traffic demand model, do you take the traffic studies that are done in each city and input those into the traffic demand model? How does that work? And then a follow-up question on accessory dwelling units.
Sure, yeah, so I'll go ahead and start it, and Dawn, if I maybe misrepresent something or leave out something that could be very important, please chime in here. So our travel demand model is if I'm going to go back to our prior slide here that shows really what makes up a travel demand model. What we are doing is we're taking traffic counts from each of the local jurisdictions to kind of set the stage for what was traffic like pre-COVID on the roadways. We also can get information from big data that shows travel patterns, how long trip links are, where people from various census tracts starting and where are they ending. So we'll use that to affect in the travel patterns. Land use assumptions are coming from local jurisdictions, as well as from the SACOG, SACMET travel demand model, where they have a good slew of information on land use really at the parcel level. We're going from parcel level up to more of what we refer to as a traffic analysis zone. And we'll have that information there. For future conditions, then we take what's anticipated in the SACOG's SACMET model for our use to anticipate what future travel patterns are and traffic needs. The improvements that we'll see in the model between the base year and future year are all stem from our regional transportation plan. So every project that we have in that list of roadway widening or interchange improvement or bike or pedestrian facility or transit are then baked into this travel demand model. And so when we run it, we'll get the results that we'll use to determine, one, whether or not the model is doing a good job of replicating existing traffic counts, and then we'll ultimately use it, if it is replicating those traffic counts, we'll use it to then assess how the traffic's then attributed back to each of the districts within SPRTA. Hopefully I answered your question.
You did. Thanks very much. So what I think the wild card in all of this is whether accessory dwelling units start to materialize in significant numbers. Some of our legacy portions of Roseville are on bigger lots and can accommodate accessory dwelling units, which then generate additional trips that may not get captured, but certainly end up, I sort of equate this to our school systems who do their best to calculate what the demand will be for schools, but then they can't figure out who's moving into the houses. So how are accessory dwelling units taken into account at this point in time that may generate more travel demand than is shown on the plans?
So I'll attempt to answer that, and if need be, I'll get back to you with additional details. So right now, accessory dwelling units, state legislation, as you may be aware, has allowed jurisdictions to streamline the implementation of those accessory dwelling units under certain sizes, and also streamline or even reduce or do away with fees on those accessory dwelling units as a way to encourage additional development within the existing footprint of our cities. So I know that Placer County itself has been kind of taking an effort and initiative on looking at accessory dwelling units. That's been rolled into their zoning code, and from what I understand from the fee programs, they do have a streamlined process for that. What I think would be interesting to bring back to you to try to help answer your question is, what percentage of these permits that come in across the planning counter are for accessory dwelling units, and what percentage is that of the overall permits that come across the counter, just to give us a sense on, is this a very small amount or much larger portion of what we're dealing with here, and how much traffic does it add? And Bruce, it looks like Don may have something he would like to add to this response.
Certainly. Thank you, Aaron. You said it very well. If we had some additional information that Aaron was alluding to regarding permits that came in, we could build it into the land use assumptions, and they would be embedded and incorporated into the forecast for future traffic. Typically, an accessory dwelling unit, they often have parking maximums and things like that. The trips generated from them is usually significantly less than a single-family dwelling. We can certainly include that as a land use class in the model. And if someone can provide a forecast for how many you're expecting in different places, we can certainly build it in. Otherwise, I believe that SACOG's sustainable community strategy land use forecasts probably build in a certain amount of densification because of things like that. And we could check with them what their assumptions are for Placer County.
Bruce, you okay?
He gave a good thumbs up.
Oh, okay, good. Just want to make sure. All righty, any further direction to staff?
Nope.
Any more questions? Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, there, I believe, is a member of the public who wishes to address this item.
So close. Mr. Garabedian, hello.
Hello again, Mike Garabedian, Placer County tomorrow. Pretty happy, Mike Garabedian, and pretty happy, Placer County tomorrow, to hear that you have stakeholders urging that you look at perhaps active transportation or other issues in dealing with transportation development there. Congratulations to you, and it's to myself for waiting so long to hear that. Thank you. I'm wondering, in terms of a stakeholder for this process, if there's a way for a group like ours to be a stakeholder. Thanks.
Mr. Board Chair, Placer Tomorrow is on our mailing list, as well as a few other advocacy organizations. Also, Sierra Club Placer is on that mailing list.
Okay, good, thank you. So without any further discussion, we'll move to item G, the fiscal year 2021 administrative budget amendment number 2.
And I will be taking this as a second item today. Okay, under our implementation plan for SPRTA that was adopted back in 2002, annually there's $150,000 that are allocated towards administrative costs for running the SPRTA fee programs. That's generally for staff time, it's for various administrative contracts, traffic modeling, legal services, etc. So $150,000 annually. Back in June 2020, we adopted the budget for the fiscal year 2021 that had $254,000 included in it for the traffic model services or anticipated traffic modeling services. So that is an increase, and over future years, we'll end up seeing lower costs to balance everything out because we do have a cap on how much administrative costs are allowed. So we did get in the bids. Our bid for this project for the regional impact fee and model update came in at $493,000, which is actually a 5-year kind of budget. So we've having to break that down into annual costs. We amended our budget back in January 2021 to add $140,000 to that, bringing us up a little bit higher. That $140,000 included $120,000 for big data. We will be bringing more information to you on this and kind of what are some of the travel patterns we're seeing from cell phone data, different devices, in-car GPS. Some of our early work is kind of really showing some interesting kind of aspects, and we do want to share with you. It's just a lot of data to get through. But we also did add at that point in time $20,000 to WSP's contract to accelerate work into this current fiscal year, because what we did is we just divided their contract in half. So we did not change the ultimate dollar amount. So the second administrative amendment is adding $25,000 more to their first year contract, bringing up to a total of $170,000 for WSP. Again, it does not change the overall contract. What it does is it pulls more money from later years that we'd allocate under the administrative costs. Should we have chosen not to augment with an additional $25,000, we would possibly have delayed some of our modeling work till next fiscal year. So we thought it's prudent to move forward. The SPRTA also agreed and is concurring that we amend this current budget, fiscal year 2021, by $25,000 total, for a total of $170 for WSP. And that is shown in attachment 1.
Any questions for staff?
Yes, so Aaron, just simply the amount that was already approved for us to move forward by splitting that into the 2 years. We're moving that into 2021 to allow us to continue this process without any delay. We would have expended those funds had the process just continued into the next budget year.
Correct.
We're just ensuring the process continues and doesn't stop.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you. That makes perfect sense, and certainly wouldn't want to delay based on a budgetary item like that that's already approved.
Any questions and any further questions? Seeing none, is there anyone from the public which wants to address this item?
Mr. Chair, there's no request for public comment.
With that, Mr. Chair, I will move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Broadway, second by Joyner to take action. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Broadway.
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes,
Howdy-Schelt.
Yes.
Joyner.
Yes.
Motion passes.
thank you. Now we'll move to item Item I,
Correct.
it's Nevada Station Operating.
Oh, actually H.
H, yeah.
What?
H.
Yeah, so now we're moving from the 2021 amendment now to next year's 21-22 administrative budget, which I'll handle. Annually we bring to you the administrative budget for SPRTA, which when SPRTA was created, the board approved a $3 million over 20-year administrative cost estimate, and we are well within that. We're very judicious in spending SPRTA funds, and typically the annual expenditure is merely staff time to keep up with things related to SPRTA. But in the last few years, because of we're doing this very large update to the travel model and the fee system, that's administrative budget has nearly tripled or quadrupled. But our expectation is that when we're done with this project, it will go back to its normal cycle, and that's enabled us to keep under that $3 million total cost. So this next year's budget is presented in summary in attachment 1 of the staff report. We are essentially reducing costs by about $60,000. That's kind of reflective in the completion of the expense related to the streetlight data, as well as some other things. We do have a few cost increases in terms of administrative costs, time, legal services, because we're anticipating quite a process to go through the update of the fees, so we'll need additional legal expenses as well. And our audit expenses went up slightly. So the budget is shown at $358,677. The revenue would be SPRTA fees of the equivalent amount, and again, that would be a cost reduction over last year of about $60,447. So staff recommends that you approve next year's budget at those levels and move the recommended action.
All right, do you get any questions for staff?
No questions.
Anyone out there? No, for Mr. Roosevelt. How about any public comment?
Mr. Chair, no request for public comment at this time.
All righty, thank you, then the board.
Mr. Chair will move approval, Broadway will move approval of fiscal year 2021-22 administrative budget.
You beat
Broadway, I
Bruce.
tried to get in there before you. What the? Come on, what is there, a lag between, what?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
right.
man.
I'm going to take full advantage of the delay. Yes, absolutely.
Take the second, Bruce.
Second.
All righty. Moved by Broadway, second by Hausfeld. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Broadway.
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
Howdeshelt.
Yes.
Joyner.
Yes.
Thank you.
I
Now,
have never alphabetically been at the end of anything. This is fascinating.
okay. Item I, right? Nevada Station.
Moving on to the next budget. So, as you all know, maybe Councilmember Howdeshelt, as he's on his first year in SPRTA, may not be aware, but Nevada Station is the building that we occupy and is actually owned by SPRTA. SPRTA issued bonds a number of years ago to purchase the property, and then we as well as our other tenants occupy and pay rent for that building, and we have to have an operating budget in place to not only pay back those bonds, but also to pay for the ongoing operating expenses of Nevada Station. And so what you have in front of you today is a summary of the prior year's budgets of FY19. We do this in 2-year increments, so this is a 2-year budget. So we provided you where we were at with 2019 and 2020. 2019, 2020, and then 2020, 2021. And then we have a proposed budget for 21-22 and 22-23. Or some of the changes in those budgets in terms of revenue. We are in what may be a challenging time in terms of tenants. We happen to be almost fully occupied with the exception of one space, and so we have within our revenue model for the first year, projected a vacancy in that space, but projected that the site be fully occupied, and we have interest in that space that we're exploring right now. We do have some increased costs related to security because of our position adjacent to the Auburn Rail Station. We have needs for increased and enhanced security and so we've added a security guard that comes through our facility nightly, as well as a camera system that we have implemented, and there's certainly costs associated with those. The remainder of the costs are simply cost increases over time, and a minor increase in staff expense related to implementing this budget and implementing this process. We did move last year to having our maintenance function move to a property management firm. So instead of the staff essentially plunge in the toilets and all that fun stuff when need be, and we still will if we have to, but we've moved that to a maintenance firm, which has worked out very well, and we recommend continuing that effort. Just because, again, not that we don't mind pitching in, but we're very busy, and that allows us to concentrate on our core activities. So staff would recommend the 2-year budget as presented in the staff report, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, any questions for staff about the operating budget for Nevada Station?
No questions.
Seeing none, any member of the public wish to address this board on that item?
Mr. Chair, there's no request for public comment at this time.
All right, the chair will entertain a motion.
Bruce, come on, man.
I move to approve the Nevada Station budget.
Second.
Broadway second.
Budget.
Okay, it's a motion by Husafeld. Get some coffee, Bruce. And I'll give it to Joyner.
There you go.
That's a second.
Thank you.
So will the clerk please call the roll?
Broadway,
Yes.
Holmes,
Yes.
Howdeshelt,
Yes.
Joyner.
Yes.
All right. Now we'll move to item J. This is I-80 Auxiliary Lanes Project, approving right-of-way contract and executing certificate of acceptance and deeds. Mr. Melko.
That would be me, changing modes from planes to highways. So yeah, we're requesting that you adopt the attached resolution approving the acquisition of the real property, fee acquisition, and temporary construction easement for a parcel at 210 South Harding in Roseville, and authorize the executive director to complete these property transactions. So in June of 2020, this board approved a contract amendment to Dockin Engineering for PS&E phase of $200,000, and also approved at that point in time $200,000 for right-of-way acquisition for this particular project. And at the time, because I know there may be some questions, because he had a presentation about it's not in a fee program, we provided a rationale at that time because of the proximity of these parcels with respect to the I-80 Douglas Boulevard interchange, which is a project in the SPRTA fee program. And also because SPRTA is the one arm of us that has the ability to acquire right-of-way. And so with that, the board accepted that and approved that $200,000 for property acquisitions. So the Aux Lanes project requires 4 parcels, to be acquired for this project. 3 of them are publicly owned parcels, and one's a privately owned parcel. And so this board in April approved right-of-way acquisition, tongue twister, right-of-way acquisition for 2 public parcels in the city of Roseville and one in the city of Rockland. So those were approved. Those acquisitions have been completed, recorded, and so we are now owning right-of-way at locations. So we have one privately owned parcel, and it's at 210 South Harding, and we need to acquire a fee acquisition and a temporary construction easement. The exhibits that are attached to the deeds that are attached to the staff report, Exhibit B, Exhibit B1, show the grant, fee acquisition, and the temporary construction easement. They're basically slivers along the westbound I-80 south of the Douglas Boulevard. The property is owned by Strouch Stevenson. It is occasionally used as a Christmas tree property. Yeah.
Is this the Bambi lot? Is that?
I'm not familiar with the phrase Bambi lot, but
yes.
it's okay.
Bambi Christmas trees. Is what it
Okay,
was
there you
forever.
go. Okay, I just know it as Christmas trees. Yeah, so we did an appraisal last June, and we revised the appraisal in March of this year. So the initial appraisal was for $87,100, and of course, you provide the appraisal to the property owner. The property owner looked at it and said, well, I have improvements that'll need to be relocated, water and electrical lines, because those are used for the Christmas tree. Fair argument. The appraiser went back and revised the proposal and came in with an appraisal of $100,245. Now, during this time frame here, we were under the working assumption, because there's a utility easement on this property, that we were going to have to relocate a PG&E gas line. And so as part of that, we were going to have a new public utility easement for that PG&E gas line, which was approximately $4,000. However, working with PG&E, and maybe because PG&E gets frustrated with Caltrans, or whatever, but PG&E has basically decided to abandon that public utility easement. So eventually we'll have to go through an abandonment process with the city of Roseville, which will be in the fall, probably. So PG&E is going to relocate that gas line, reroute it. And so we'll have to participate in that cost, because the PG&E and the state has a master agreement where they split costs 50-50. So I'll be back before this board later this fall with respect to that PG&E utility agreement. With that, since the easement is no longer needed by PG&E, we went back with an updated settlement offer to the property owner for $96,200, because we subtracted out the need for the PG&E easement. And the property owners agreed to that. They accepted that. Also during this time frame, there was, I believe it's the mother, she passed away. And so it's the mother and daughter. And so I guess the title needed, the vesting title needed to be updated. So now the vesting title, which is not current in the attached exhibits, but has been updated, shows the son and the daughter. So we've completed that, but the exhibits that you have are old, is the old title. So with that, we are recommending that you authorize the acquisition of the fee and the acquisition of the temporary construction easement, and authorize Mike to go forward and make the necessary transactions for the real property acquisition. And I'd be glad to take any questions.
Any questions for staff on this item?
Nope, no question.
I see none. Anyone from the public wish to address this item?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there is a member of the public.
Hello, Michael.
Hi, Mike Garabedian. No position on this project, including no opposition. I think everybody who uses that area recognizes the safety issues. In terms of relieving congestion, or whether this is just moving it somewhere else or moving it down to Antelope or something, again, this kind of faux justification I don't think works or should be relied on, but we do have the safety issues, so that's our comment.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
No other public comment at this time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Move
what-
staff's
moves-
approval, move staff's recommendation.
And Broadway will second.
Broadway was already talking, Bruce. I think he had it.
Well,
I'll defer
he
to.
must have had his coffee.
Wait till I'm not on vacation, I'm there in person, okay? That's all I gotta say.
Okay, motion by Hausefeld,
Motion by Howdeshelt, second by
Habershelt.
Howdeshelt,
That's it.
second by Broadway.
Mr.
Broadway,
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
Howdeshelt,
Yes,
Joyner,
Yes.
All right,
Motion
the motion is passed.
Okay.
And now we move to item K. That's the executive director's report, is that correct?
Yes, sir. The only thing I wanted to mention is back to the SPRTA fee program, the streetlight fees. We are getting great use out of those. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. We're working with the city of Roseville on a number of activities that they're using that streetlight data for. More than I can mention right now, but we're working closely with Jason Tchaikovsky and his staff to utilize that. We're using it to analyze a park and ride lot in the city of Lincoln and who's actually going to and from that park and ride lot. And then the last one of significance that we're working on is with the issue of parking at the confluence to determine where the people are coming from that are going to the confluence, and so that we can concentrate our outreach efforts by state parks, Caltrans, Placer County, El Dorado County, PCTPA, and EDCTC. We can concentrate our efforts appropriately by utilizing that streetlight data. So I just wanted to mention to you how handy that has been to have in our toolbox. So.
Great.
Any comments for executive director? Nope. Seeing none. Now it's, what is next? Board direction to staff, is that it? Yeah. Any more further direction? Nope. We have informational items for your perusal. And with that, I think we will adjourn until August 25th, 2021. Thank you for your kind attention. We are adjourned.
Thank you.